September 30th, 1955. James Dean takes to the road for the last time, heading for Salinas and an appointment with destiny. At the wheel of his Porsche, the 24-year-old carves out his place as the ultimate icon.
I don't think anyone will ever be remembered after their death, 50 years like James Dean is. He's a name today, probably more so than he was when he was alive.
In Hollywood, what it is, even today, which is really amazing, people will say about a new young actor, maybe he's the next James Dean. And they've been saying that for 50 years.
James Dean.
I guess you're about the best looking gal we've seen around here in a long time.
The star who became a legend, who spoke for all the restless young as no one has before or since.
Why, thank you, Jack.
At his death, James Dean is still almost an unknown and has just completed his third film. But the three roles he plays and his particular personality confer on him the image of the consummate rebel. His mark on Hollywood is indelible.
I don't think many people know that he was only in Hollywood 16 months and did 3 major films. And Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley had a Hollywood experience that was much longer than that.
They predict that Elvis Presley will be another James Dean. Now, have you heard that?
I've heard something about it, but I would never compare myself in any way to James Dean, because James Dean was a genius.
He made East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, Giant, 16 months, and race cars, and boom, and he was dead. And it's just kind of all very dramatic, just like his life was.
Were it not for his death, he'd probably just be another old actor today. But he died at the right time, and he died in a dramatic way.
There's kind of a what-if to it. A tragic death happens very quickly, and that seems to be a central theme for all of them. Monroe, of course, had it. Presley had it. And obviously James Dean had it.
Being frozen as a 24-year-old is just an amazing phenomenon that nobody's ever repeated that or been this popular this long after he's been dead.
Live fast, die young, and leave a beautiful corpse, said James Dean. A challenge he met only too well.
That's the story of Rebel Without a Cause. It really happened.
Jimmy always had a lot of confidence in himself, and he'd always told my mom and dad that if he could just get a break, he'd make it. He seemed to have this drive to be a success fast, and of course, before he was 24 years old, he had made 3 movies, so he did do it fast, and he seemed to be in control.
Dean's career takes off in March 1954. He turns his back on bit parts for TV and makes his first movie with the hottest director around, Elia Kazan.
Kazan had seen him. He gave him a screen test in New York for East of Eden. And the only competition he had was another young actor named Paul Newman. And Dean got the part.
Warner Brothers had to seek out vibrant new personalities, tap new sources of talent, create new stars. James Dean as Cal, the wildest boy you've ever met.
It was really a thrill to see Jimmy up on the screen, and of course we didn't know how much he would be in it, and turned out he was in it almost all the time. But to me, it never seemed like he was acting in East of Eden. It just seemed like that was Jimmy up there.
It was a very, very powerful performance. It was very close to, the character was very close to what Jimmy really was, and Kazan was wise enough to just pull that out of him and use it, make him use everything he was.
At that time in Hollywood, the style of acting was changing. There was Brando and Montgomery Clift. They brought with them a revolutionary style to film, and it turned things upside down.
James Dean was not just a Hollywood actor or a Hollywood star. I think he was America's last pioneer because he did things that behind the camera and in front of the camera that other people never did.
I test you, Vic.
James Dean has an instinctive talent for powerful emotional portrayals, played his own way. When an actor plays a scene exactly the way a director orders, it isn't acting, it's following instructions, he would say.
He liked to sit and watch someone and just study what they do, and different types of people, and then I think later on he would pull those people into some of his acting. In East of Eden, and some of the scenes with Raymond Massey, he kind of did little things that weren't part of the script, and Raymond Massey really got upset.
In the script, it called for a conflict between the two. So he built it off camera by not talking to him, and then on camera to do intentionally, which would aggravate him. And the actor wanted to actually quit the show because Jimmy was bringing such turmoil to the set. But if you see that movie today, you can see that conflict is real. It's not just acted.
And I suggest a little slower, Cal, and you don't have to read the verse numbers.
For this shall everyone that is godly pray unto thee. And surely in the floods of great waters they shall not come nigh unto him. Selah. 7.
Not the numbers, Cal.
Thou art my hiding place. Thou shalt preserve me from trouble. Thou shalt compass me about with songs of deliverance. Selah. 8.
You have no repentance. You're bad. Through and through, bad.
It was very hard to adjust to this, but I got to know him well enough that I could see through some of the changes of mood and realized that a lot of them were for effect. He was trying things out, trying a scene, trying to make a scene, seeing how you would react to something unexpected.
Jimmy's constant provocation leads to a bad boy reputation and a complicated relationship with Jack Warner, the film's producer. But impressed by his performance in East of Eden, Warner soon offers him a second movie, Rebel Without a Cause.
The film came about because he had a contract with Warner Brothers. Nicholas Ray wanted to be the next director with a Dean film, and they literally wrote a script for Dean. They knew that they had potentially a big star.
No, I don't want you to go to the police. There were other people. Why should you be the only one involved?
But I am involved. We are all involved. Mom, a kid was killed tonight.
This is all going too fast for me,
You better give
son.
me something. You better give me something fast.
Jimmy, you're very young.
Rebel Without a Cause evokes a social reality that America is barely waking up to, a rebellious and delinquent youth. Director Nicholas Ray knows Jimmy is made for the part.
You want to kill your own father!
You barely ever hear a fan talk about East of Eden or Giant. It's always Rebel.
There were very few actors that I can think of who portrayed adolescent youth as well as Jimmy did.
Before that, teenagers weren't really heard. You know, he yelled at his parents and he got mad and, you know, threw things. And, you know, before that, kids were all teenagers and movies were all just squeaky clean and wholesome.
He's the first teenager that did this. Yeah, that's what's important. He's the first teenager that said, sometimes parents are wrong. And that's essentially what Dean is saying in Rebel. You say one thing, the other says another thing. You know, there's a scene about it in Rebel, and then you're tearing me apart.
You know what kind of drunken brawls those parties turn into. It's no place for kids.
A minute ago, you said you didn't care if he drinks. He said a little drink.
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
He did such a tremendous job playing the characters he played. And honestly, I think some people get the characters mixed up with the James Dean himself.
It is conceivable, at least, that the young at the time of Dean's death were looking for an attachment, looking for a human being, looking for a symbol to attach their own frustrations and anxieties and anger. And it coincided with not only that a movie was made about that particular aspect of the young, Rebel Without a Cause, but he died, so he became the martyr.
When they had the funeral for him was on exactly the same day that they released Rebel Without a Cause. I think the timing of that event probably increased his popularity 1,000-fold.
They released Rebel about a week after his death, and it was just kind of sad to see him up there on the screen and knowing that he wasn't here anymore.
All the ingredients are set for a legend to be born. Captured in the brilliant bloom of youth, James Dean becomes a worldwide phenomenon. His image is printed everywhere, and there is a surprising abundance of photos for such a short career.
There are many pictures of Jimmy because he wanted many pictures, because it's conceivable he knew he would die young and he wanted to leave a legend. And I came along and proposed the ultimate legendary project. Let's go back and do your life. One has to keep in mind that I had no idea he was going to die. So the photographs become legendary, not with my intention as such, but that's the case.
Dennis Stock and his camera accompany James Dean as far as Fairmount, Indiana, where he grew up. It is February 1955, the last time he visits his family and his cousin's last memories.
No one had any idea that we were never going to see him again. The fact that Dennis took all his photos and they've been in magazines and books and things, you know, every time I see one of them, it brings back memories, you know, of when he was here. It was a very happy time. It was right after Christmas, and I'd got this little Jaguar toy, and it was a car that you could take apart and take the wheels off and take the motor out of. And, you know, he got down on the floor with me and played with that.
For a joke, Dean asks Stock to take a photo of him in a coffin. 8 months later, his body would once again lie in the same funeral parlor.
On the farm, he was all right, but then I photographed him in a coffin. He wasn't so all right. You know, that there was an unbalanced human being there.
Unwittingly, Dennis Stock provides posterity with a different Jimmy Dean, the fragile and touching farm boy whose life began with a tragedy.
Jimmy's mother died when he was 9 years old, and he came here to live with my folks. My mom and dad raised him from age 9 until he left here after graduating from Fairmount High School. And to me, he was just like an older brother.
He is coming from a quiet place, but he's still a very angry young man because he lost his mother when he didn't want to. And nobody can explain to him why. So he is rebellious.
"52 years later, this small town in Indiana still celebrates its own Hollywood rebel. Every September, tens of thousands of fans and admirers flock to the James Dean Festival.
We're studying this subculture that's called gravers. And gravers are men and women of all backgrounds, socioeconomic level, ethnic backgrounds, who are interested with dead celebrity icons.
We get James Dean fans that visit Fairmount from all over the world, and you can't tell a James Dean fan by looking at them. Artists, doctors, lawyers, punk rock kids, you know, bikers.
What makes an icon successful, one that can be long-lasting and have a long following, is they have to have a number of things. First of all, they have to have a place. You know, a place where people can go and walk where they walked and see what they saw and touch what they touched.
And I'm looking for the name of the three actors. The three actors.
The festival kicks off with the Main Street Car Show. Among the 2,000 vehicles on show are the red Ford and the tractor Jimmy drove in his youth.
You can tell from the festival in Fairmount that, you know, there's still a lot of people that like James Dean, and Rebel Without a Cause and Jimmy is what made the 49, 50, 51 Mercury car the classic car that it is. And if you ever want to see Mercury's, Fairmount's a place to come.
James Dean's passionate association with cars is not limited to one legendary scene in Rebel Without a Cause. With his first paychecks, he signs up for real races on real racetracks.
I met James Dean in the movie called Rebel Without a Cause. I was the person that customized the Mercury, and also I worked with him on what we call the chicken chase. I coordinated the stunts and also the different variations. From there on, we became kind of what we call racing or custom car buddies. He liked cars very much, so we always, on the set, we'd talk about different cars and things like that, and he was getting into racing and into that variation, so we kind of followed each other around while he went into his racing days.
He liked speed, he really did.
And then when it was time for the kids to go to bed, Jimmy'd say to me, well, shall we? And I'd say, sure. And we'd go outside, and he'd get, and I think in those days he had a Porsche, an old one. And I'd get in my old Buick convertible that was souped up, and we'd drive to the top of Mulholland Drive. We'd pull up at a stop, and he'd say, okay, let's go. And he always won because he had a faster car and was a better driver, I'm sure.
That everybody, when they heard he was going to race in Palm Springs and Bakersfield and Santa Barbara, that here comes this young actor, what could he know about driving? And Phil Hill, who was one of the world's most renowned racers, said he was terrifying everybody else before he got on the track. But once he got on the track, he was the most precise driver he had ever seen. He never endangered himself or any other drivers.
He was a very good racer. He, with his short amount of time that he was driving and his experience he was getting, he could be and could have been one of the top racers. He took a lot of chances, and some people call him Daredevil, or possibly a man that didn't care about whether he crashed or got killed or not, but that's not true. He was just a very good racer, and to win a race, you have to take chances, or you have to know what you're going to do.
His passion is of concern to the studio. Fearing that an accident will compromise shooting on his third film, Giant, Warner forbids Jimmy from driving before October 1st, the very day of the race in Salinas. Jimmy signs up.
Jimmy called me and asked if I wanted to go to the racetrack with him. He was going to a racetrack, and he was going to race the new Porsche he'd bought. And I couldn't go with him to the race the following day because I had to be in Mexico to do an interview. And Jimmy tried 2 or 3 other friends he wanted to go with him, and no one was available.
I was working in Switzerland, and I got this need to see him. I was working on a movie there. And so I got on the plane. Mutual friend picked me up at the airport of Los Angeles, took me to a house where Jimmy was. And then he said to me, come with me this weekend to ride. And I said, sure, I'd love to. And something turned in my brain, and I said, no, I can't. I had no idea why. I just simply said, I can't.
The day before he dies, Jimmy's new Porsche is finally ready.
When we went to the car lot where he was buying the Porsche, obviously he was excited, but I had no idea how excited until he insisted on every detail of the car being explained to him, shown to him. But he spent 4 hours with me standing there stamping my feet, waiting, while he went over every detail of that car, and he was so proud of that car. He really, I think he loved it probably more than he loved any woman.
It is largely thanks to James Dean that Porsche has become a mythical brand name. For the past 20 years, the star of the Fairmount show is an exact replica of Jimmy's Spider. In pride of place at the entrance to the show, it captures everyone's attention.
We built this car in 6 weeks, and that was rushing it just a little bit. We worked day and night, but I was trying to make a big show in my hometown of Detroit, and that was in 1987. So over the years, I've learned a lot about the car and about Jimmy, that he was a car guy. He loved cars, loved motorcycles, loved to race, and that's what we like to do. And that's more the connection than, say, the movie stuff. Original cars, they made 90 of them, so there's not very many left. This is a replica, and so there's several companies that are making bodies, and you could purchase one and build it. So there's probably a lot of them out there. Not too many done up with the 130s and the Little Bastard and the whole James Dean connection.
The term Little Bastard was a term that a lot of different people claim, and I've read it repeatedly. But I personally believe that the one that really originated it was Jack Warner, because he could not control James Dean, and he called him a little bastard. And right after he bought the car, he took it to Barris's on Riverside Drive, and Barris lettered Little Bastard on the trunk. And then Jimmy purposely parked this new 550 Porsche Spider right outside in the parking lot so that Jack Warner could look out of his window and see that.
Hollywood is locked into the star system, and Jack Warner cannot allow another studio to benefit from Dean's popularity.
James Dean was really one of the first people to get a 9-picture contract. He signed that contract the last day of his life, really, with Jack Warner and George Stevens present. And it was a tool that Jack Warner wanted to use to control James Dean, because they figured that's the only way that they could do it, is to offer him a 9-picture contract for $1 million. And at the last minute, Jack Warner changed the contract to $997,000 just to make sure that James Dean did not ever get Hollywood's first $1 million contract.
James Dean, however, does enjoy the unprecedented privilege of choosing 3 of the 9 films his contract demands.
The night before he died, he came to see me, and he wanted to do a modern, contemporary Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I thought that was a very suitable subject for him because he had such a schizophrenic personality, so changeable. And so we talked about it and started to sort of kick ideas around. And he was going to sort of finance this script, and I was going to put it together.
He had plans for the future that were incredible. He wanted to be a director. He did not want to remain as an actor. He wanted to be able to parlay that into becoming a director. And when he got his first camera, he began to take a lot of photographs. And he thought in terms of scenes.
How about you set the beam?
As evening falls over Sunset Boulevard, James Dean calls in for the last time at Boogie's, a trendy bar where all Hollywood comes to hang out.
My father was a bongo player. He played bongos with James Dean. And James Dean, after he would get off the movie set, he would go up to Sunset Boulevard and watch my father and Bob Romeo play music. And then James Dean would get up on stage and sit in with my father and Bob Romeo on flute.
He liked to draw. He liked to paint. I've seen paintings and drawings he's done. He's very, very artistic. He used to draw all the time when he was here at home, and he'd encourage me to draw.
Certain people can identify with him in a lot of different ways because he was so multifaceted. The Indiana farm boy, the wholesome high school athlete and student, New York City bohemian, Hollywood movie star, race car driver. You know, he painted, he played bongos. So I think he was just so multifaceted that people could identify with him in a lot of different ways.
I think he had a curiosity. I don't think it's appropriate to believe that he necessarily would have been outstanding in anything more than acting.
On the morning of September 30th, 1955, James Dean crosses Los Angeles for the last time. And yet he's still officially not allowed to drive.
We saw him before he left when he was getting off with Hickman and Sandy Roth. They were off to the gasoline station, and the car was on the trailer. Of course, from there on, he took the car off the trailer and wanted to drive it. Of course, Bill and everybody, we all said, don't drive it. You don't want to drive it 300 or 400 miles clear up to Salinas for the race. I want to get some used to it, and I want to get into it. So it was just one of those things that kept falling into place that led up to the tragedy.
There is something inevitable about the tragedy. Neither the studio ban nor the unreasonable distance he has to drive would change anything. Jimmy slides in behind the wheel.
He liked to hear the engine go and the speed that he could make out of it.
Jimmy was going very fast, much too fast for the road. Jimmy'd gotten a ticket on the way down.
We traced back the route he had taken from the time he received the citation until the time of the accident, and he would have averaged about 70 miles an hour from the time he received the citation to the time the location of the accident. However, we did know that in this time he had stopped, so we know he was going much faster than this.
Jimmy is not alone that day. Posterity will benefit from the presence of photographer Sandy Roth, who follows him, camera at the ready.
I'm thankful that the photos were taken that day. Were able to capture his last moments as much as they could.
But in his Porsche, Jimmy is much quicker, and he speeds past him. The last photo of Jimmy alive. Sandy will see him just once more at Blackwell's Corner, a store in the middle of the desert.
Every day we get people asking about James Dean, on how he died, where he died. History states that he bought an apples and a Coke. That's what they say he bought. So what happens is people want to know, do we have any apples? Do we have any Coke? The store that we're in now is 3,200 square feet, and we're building a 20,000 square feet building. And it's going to have some James Dean memorabilia. It doesn't hurt. You know, people come in and they know that this was James Dean's last stop, so they want to stop here and get the feel. You know, it's kind of a neat story knowing that he stopped here and he drove 25 miles west and died.
Towards the end of the afternoon, James Dean takes to the road again in his sleek silver machine, heading for the final crossroads.
The road was going straight into the sun on September 30th. And instead of the sun being up here, it really was down here. So you're looking right into it. And on his car, they don't have any sun visors to block this, so you're looking straight into the sun.
He was driving a car that was low to the ground. It was painted silver, and it blended right in with the road that kind of went up a hill right behind him. And of course, the fellow that made a turn in front of him he'd made that turn probably hundreds of times in his life because he was a local person there.
As the intersections come together, they're a Y intersection. There was a mountain range over here with the sun going down over here, looking in this direction. But Jimmy's car was approaching, the Porsche was approaching down here. The Donald Turnipseed car was approaching from Paso Robles in this direction. So Donald Turnipseed had the opportunity to make the turn to Fresno, to his left, as Jimmy had the right. It was a yield intersection.
Evidently, what really happened is this Turnipseed didn't see him. The sun was setting to his rear, which reflected onto the asphalt. And there's waves in the road like this. So this little short Porsche racing car coming over those waves, you could see something and then you couldn't. It was like as if you were seeing a mirage or something out in a desert.
Well, what the accident report shows is that there was two sets of skid marks. There was one set of skid marks about 40 feet long. Then there was an interruption. Then there was another set of skid marks about 60 feet long. He had no control when he put the brakes on, so the car shifted to the right into Jimmy's path.
At that moment in time, he was living life to its fullest. He was sitting in a brand new, beautiful car, going fast with the wind blowing in his hair, and he was speeding to a racetrack. He had everything going for him, and then it was over. What better way to die? Doing something you love, and then in the midst of it, it's like dying in the middle of sex. Great.
It was a car that was built to race. It was made out of aluminum. It was just like crushing a piece of tinfoil against something hard.
The control that Jim had with the car and everything he did was right. Jimmy did what a professional or a craftsmanship racing man would do. He would try to maneuver around that automobile, not with braking, but with force and power in your engine. He immediately geared it. He immediately put his foot down, braked a little bit, put his foot down, turned his steering wheel, brodied a little bit to the left, come back around with his wheel to go around that car. If that car would have just stopped 1/110th of a second, Jimmy would have went away from him.
But he was speeding. That's all there was to it, and he couldn't stop in time. I think his last words, according to Witherick, were, that car up there has got to stop. And that car up there didn't stop.
The point of impact, which was here, and the car spun several times and came to rest. It did not roll over. And Jimmy, according to a tow truck driver that I personally interviewed, said that Jimmy's feet were tangled in the pedals and he was laying across the other seat.
Jimmy's neck is broken. He dies in the ambulance. Donald Turnipseed is unscathed.
Everybody involved in the accident was a victim. Donald Turnipseed, his life was never the same. You know, he was a college student. He had to quit college because, you know, he killed James Dean. People were hounding him and coming after him, and reporters.
He didn't want to be known as the man who killed Jimmy Dean. It wasn't his fault in any event. I think it was certainly, for a while, uncomfortable for him because he was in the newspapers, and every story about Jimmy had his name.
Donald Turnipseed absolutely refused any request for interviews. He would not do that. He had a lot of death threats on his life, I heard, and he was always afraid that somebody was going to do something to him. So we tried several times, but he declined all interviews before he passed away.
Today in Cholam, a monument commemorates the moment on September 30th, 1955, when Jimmy encountered eternity.
I visited the accident site a couple different times when I was living in California, and it just kind of had sad feelings, and it's a quiet, desolate highway. There's nothing really out there, and you can't really imagine an accident happening. I mean, there's just nothing in any direction. You know, such a freak accident that somebody would pull in front of him out in the middle of the desert.
A lot of Deaners have told me that they don't feel complete till they make the trip to Shalom, California, where he was killed. So you can't just do Fairmount. Fairmount's kind of a sacred place, and it's very important in the Deaners' civil religion, but you have to go to Shalom too. It's no different than pilgrimage to Mecca. You know, it's the same kind of observance, okay, that makes them feel part, in this case, of their icon.
News of Jimmy's death spreads like wildfire. George Stevens, director of his third film, Giant, is in a screening room checking rushes Jimmy had shot just days before. The telephone rings and falls from his hands. The next morning, the accident is on every front page.
My folks were on their way back home here when the accident happened. My dad said that he heard on the radio on the way back that a young upcoming movie star had been killed in a sports car accident. Well, he knew that Jimmy had just bought that Spider, and he just had a feeling that it was Jimmy. But before they could go ahead and tell who it was and everything, he just shut the radio off and didn't say anything to my mom about it. And he said he just made a point not to read any newspapers or anything like that, because if it was Jimmy, he didn't want her to know about it till he got home. And of course, when they got home, well, they found out it was him.
And I think that car was an instrument for his death, that his temperament to test things, which was really the very heart of his personality, eventually caught up with him, that he pushed that car a little too fast in the wrong place, you know, rather than on a racing course or something like that, and he killed him.
The myth initially builds around the idea that Jimmy was somehow responsible for his own death, with his need for speed and a tormented personality. Until 1992, when Exponent, a Silicon Valley company, examined a case studied umpteen times before, this time using new computer analysis resources.
No one since the time of his death in 1955 had done an engineering or scientific evaluation of the accident. So we had access to the police report, we had access to site photographs of the accident scene. And working off the photographs and doing an on-site evaluation down in Paso Robles, we were able to put together a scenario to understand how the accident occurred. And what we found was that Dean might have been speeding up until the point of the accident, but at the time of the accident, his car was traveling between 55 and 60 miles an hour, as was the Ford. So the police report, which said that Dean was traveling in excess of 70 miles an hour at the time of the accident, in our opinion, was wrong. The fact that he died in a very tragic accident in a very high-performance vehicle, in a situation where everyone said it was his fault, I think it probably adds to the myth.
The Dean effect is immediate. 1 week after the accident, 3,000 unknown faces joined Fairmount's 2,000 inhabitants at their idol's funeral.
The church was full, and they had opened the windows of the church, and so people outside could hear the sermon and so forth.
We came in to the church, and in the front row was the family. And we just sat to the side and we let it all happen, you know, sort of dazed. And then eventually, when it was over, we walked up and went up to Marcus.
Dennis Stalk, he came in, he hadn't been there yet, and he came in and he walked in front of me and walked over to my dad, and Dad got up and they hugged each other, and that's the first time my dad had cried. And he just cried and cried.
You're always surprised when a young friend dies, and you're young yourself. You're invulnerable, you know, you're young. People don't die when they're young unless they're in a war. You know, sure, it was traumatic. I left Hollywood. I just stayed around, went to Indiana for the funeral, and then I said, I've had it enough.
There was 4 girls that I remember reading about that they committed suicide within a week after Jimmy died, which was very unusual. And when thousands and thousands of pieces of fan mail went to Warner Brothers, they had no idea what they really had in his popularity.
But popularity has a downside: rumor. Books and magazines vie for the hottest revelations and scandal. Jimmy's life is dissected and analyzed, particularly his sexuality.
I didn't know anything really about Jimmy's sex life until after he died. Then when he died, I began to interview friends, many of them male, and many of them claimed, and I wasn't there so I don't know, to have had relationships with him. There were so many stories that it seemed to me that it was likely that there was some truth to the fact that he was bisexual, not homosexual, but as he put it once to me, I'm not going to go through life with one hand behind my back.
The difficulty was really trying to sort through all of the things that had been said about him. Somebody would have a rumor and they would put it in a book, and then the next book would expound on that rumor and basically turn it into a lie. It really wasn't true about him at all. Or they would take something he said and then take it out of context, and that began to build a legend of what he was.
His sexuality, it's a question of your own sexuality. You're gay, you want to believe that Jimmy was gay. You're straight, you want to be certain that Jimmy was straight. Hey, he was all things to all men, or women.
What was true was that he had had the impact on people to make them want to invent incredible tales about him. He made them want to make him more important. It was amazing. And they did. They supplied everything. They were, in themselves, the best public relations machine I have ever seen.
The line between rumor and mythology is a fine line. Fans are quick to cross it.
They have prophecies. For example, the famous car commercial that he did with Gig Young.
Hi, Gig. We asked Jimmy over today because he's a racing man himself. A real one, not a crazy one. Jimmy, we probably have a great many young people watching our show tonight, and for their benefit, I'd like your opinion about fast driving on the highway. Do you think it's a good idea?
A good point. I used to fly around quite a bit, you know. I took a lot of unnecessary chances on the highways. And I started racing, and now I drive on the highways. I'm extra cautious, because no one knows what they're doing. Half the time, you don't know what this guy's going to do with that one. People say racing is dangerous, but I'll take my chances on the track any day than on a highway. Well, Gig, I think I'd better take off.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. Life, you might say, might be mine.
Dean is referred to that as the prophecy commercial. There's prophecy pictures. And the most famous is the Dennis Stock one, where Dean is in the picture window of the funeral home, and he's sitting up in a coffin. Another famous prophecy photograph, and that's how the Deaners talk about it, you know, prophecy photographs. There's a picture of James Dean and his cousin, Marcus Winslow Jr., when he was like 9 years old, pointing to a tombstone that says Dean on it. I don't know if you've seen this one, but that's another one. And Dieners use it as part of the, you know, you could see it coming, you know, it was a prophecy, that kind of stuff. They have all these different kinds of things that clearly tell us that this isn't Jesus Christ, okay, but it has the same symbolism. After all, the crucifix picture is huge among the Dieners.
And that and very good promotion keeps them going. There's money invested in the Jimmy Dean image, and there are very good marketing people who keep pushing it, coming out with new dolls or new ashtrays or what have you, and they keep plugging away at this. So that's part of it. That's to me, that's a major part of the equation. It's commercial.
The last weekend in September is Fairmount's most lucrative. It's not easy for the fans to leave the James Dean Fest without stopping by Rebel Rebel, the souvenir store. Probably the world's biggest collection of James Dean memorabilia and spin-off products.
411 is your change. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Thank you. 422. 10. About 750. There you go. Enjoy it. Thank you. Thanks. T-shirts are popular, of course. Books are always popular. Books with photos of him. Items of memorabilia just make you feel closer to that you know, they're gone. You're never going to be close to them. I guess it's a spiritual, metaphysical communication or closeness. At the peak of my collection, I had to have everything, you know, magnets, little doodads, pens, writing pens, you name it, you know, buttons, you know, right up to clothing that he owned and wore, and drawings and paintings that he did.
A metaphysical connection which can be measured in dollars and which perpetuates the image. With new generations of Dean fans appearing all the time, the James Dean business has a healthy future, as the agent who manages his image can confirm.
We're talking about a property that is really a brand. It's really no different than a Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, or something like that. James Dean's very big in Asia. He's very big in Europe, South America. And so we're talking about hundreds of different companies and obviously selling many, many, many millions of dollars worth of products on the marketplace.
It's hard to estimate exactly how many hundreds of millions these products generate, but the machine is well oiled and ticks over by itself.
Those products do help perpetuate the legend of James Dean, and he's been deceased now for 52 years, and that's several generations of young people that continue to adore and want to buy products associated with James Dean.
For the past 52 years, the Fairmount Cemetery has hosted a commemoration ceremony. On September 30th, fans from around the world, from Indiana or Japan, come to celebrate their icon.
A lot of the same people keep coming back year after year, event after event, and it's really turned into a community.
They make it a goal of being there at Death Day, at birthdays, special events like the premiere of a famous movie. And they do it religiously. I have seen people at the ceremony and at the cemetery. When Marcus Winlow Jr. arrives, I have literally seen people approach him and go like this, just to touch him. You know, and I've even seen people with one finger, the same way they do on the grave, on the stone itself.
Usually when someone dies, you're kind of allowed to silently mourn their death or whatever, and you never forget them, but as time goes on, they get further and further back in your mind. But with Jimmy, because of his popularity and because of the people that he's inspired and so forth, there's not hardly a day goes by that you aren't reminded of him somehow. Just within the past couple years, they've released always old movies on DVDs, and you know, there's talk of putting his TV shows on DVDs and so forth, and James Dean's going to be around for a long, long time.